Imagine receiving the most devastating news of your life, and in that same instant, feeling your heart skip a beat. When all seemed lost, an unexpected helping hand appears, bringing hope where there was only despair. You are about to discover how a simple act can turn things around in a way no one ever imagined. Before we dive into this breathtaking journey, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you are listening to our story from. And prepare to be moved. A tycoon receives the terrible news that his son has died, and at the same time suffers a massive heart attack. When everything seems to be heading for the worst outcome, a little girl of just 6 years old appears, coming from the streets, who holds his hand and begs, "Please don't die now." What happens next makes everyone present cry, and without a doubt will surprise you. Stay until the end of this story full of overcoming. If you are interested, subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you watch us from. Continuing, Enrique Escobar was in his office on the 35th floor of a luxurious building in downtown Porto Alegre, looking out at the maze of skyscrapers through the large panoramic windows. At 64, he had achieved everything that wealth could offer: mansions, luxury cars, and companies in various sectors. However, on that cold autumn morning, as the first rays of sunlight bathed the city in golden light, he was holding an envelope whose results confirmed his worst fears. His blood pressure was bordering on extreme limits, and the doctors had warned, "You need to slow down. Your heart won't last long if you keep going at this pace." But how could he slow down? Work was the only way for Enrique to distract himself from the emptiness that had been eating away at him since his wife Helena had abandoned him 17 years earlier, taking their only son, Paulo, with her. To forget, he threw himself into business, building a billion-dollar empire. However, in that relentless movement, he also lost the most valuable parts of himself. His secretary, Marta, came in quietly, her face worried. "Mr. Escobar, your meeting with the partners is scheduled to start in 5 minutes. He quickly put the envelope away. He fixed his Italian tie and tried to ignore the sharp pain in his chest that was becoming more and more frequent. The sharp pain was a reminder of what the doctors had diagnosed, but he simply couldn't stop. Inside the meeting room, executives in impeccable suits were already waiting for him. Chief among them was Leonardo Fernandez, a longtime rival and now a minority shareholder. He smiled primly. "Enrique, we were talking about the recent merger and..." The world began to spin. Leonardo's voice sounded distant, as if coming from a tunnel. Cold sweat ran down Enrique's forehead, and the pain in his chest intensified in a frightening way. The secretary approached, distressed. "Mr. Escobar, are you okay?" Enrique tried to speak, but he had no strength. His legs gave out, and before he lost consciousness, all he saw was the terrified looks of the executives. With a thud, he collapsed to the floor. When he regained some consciousness, he was lying on the cold floor of the meeting room. Broken voices were shouting for an ambulance. The pain was overwhelming, as if a monumental weight were on his chest. Then he heard a child's voice, crystal clear amidst the chaos. For a moment, he thought he was hallucinating. "Don't die, please, don't die now." Opening his eyes with difficulty, he made out a small figure, leaning over his chest. The little girl looked to be no more than 6 years old. She had very dark, tangled hair and old, dirty clothes. She looked at him with a deep intensity, filled with enormous seriousness and compassion. "What? How? Did you get in here?" he managed to stammer. "Through the side exit," the girl answered bluntly. "Sometimes I go in to get food, but today was different. I felt like I had to go up to the top floor." The pain was increasing, and Henry felt the darkness trying to swallow him. But the girl's small hand held his with surprising firmness. "Don't close your eyes," she begged, her voice distressed. "Tell me a story. Please, if you tell me, I'll let you sleep, okay?" Despite the torment in his chest and the ringing in his ears, the innocence of that voice seemed to draw Henry back to reality. "A story," he whispered, feeling his vision blur. "A happy story," the girl repeated. "Do you have a happy story to tell me?" At that moment, the paramedics entered the room and gently removed the little girl. As he was being lifted onto a stretcher, Henrique heard her scream, "I'll wait for your story. Please don't die." On the way to the hospital, between bouts of pain and brief blackouts, the girl's voice continued to echo in Henrique's thoughts. A little beggar. And in all those years, he had never realized how many people wandered around his building looking for scraps of food. Why had she come up just at the moment of his attack? Still delirious, he had the clear feeling that that little girl was preventing him from completely plunging into darkness. The last thing he thought, before losing consciousness completely, was that if he survived, perhaps he really did owe that stranger a happy story. Henrique woke up in a private hospital room, as luxurious as everything else in his life. However, not even the best hospital suite could alleviate the feeling of abandonment that tortured him. As he watched the drips of serum, the doctor, Dr. Araujo, calmly explained, "You almost died. If you hadn't received immediate care, we would hardly be talking now." The businessman could not get rid of the image of the girl. In a conversation with the nurses, he learned that the little girl had disappeared before the ambulance even left, like an angel who appears and disappears without a trace. Henrique's rest was short-lived. Leonardo Fernandez entered the room, carrying a folder of documents. His usual smile didn't reach his eyes. "What a scare, huh, Henrique? But since you're better, we need to deal with some fundamental points of the company." Henrique felt his heart race and the heart monitor beeping in warning. He had barely recovered from a heart attack, and the rival partner appeared wanting to take advantage. "Get out," he ordered, his voice still weak. "Let me rest, now." With a cynical smile, Leonardo gathered up his papers. "Don't take too long, Henrique. The company can't wait for you to recover forever." Right after Leonardo left, there was a stampede in the hallway. Nurses rushed into the room, looking for someone. "She escaped from the children's ward. Did she come in here?" they asked, distressed. Then, the girl who had helped Henrique herself came in unceremoniously, out of breath. "Sorry, ladies," she said upon seeing the nurses, "but I needed to see if he was alive." The shock was evident on Henrique's face. There she was, the unknown little girl, now wearing hospital pajamas that were too big for her tiny body. The nurses tried to take her back to the pediatric ward, but the businessman, on impulse, asked them to let her stay. "She saved my life," he explained. "I want to talk to her." The employees agreed and left, reluctantly. The girl looked at Henrique shyly, leaning against the wall. "You really survived," she said, somewhat relieved. "And the happy story. You said you were going to tell me." Henrique smiled slightly, although he was confused. "First, I want to know your name." "I'm Talia," she replied. "And you?" "I'm Henrique Escobar. Why are you hospitalized, Talia?" The little girl shrugged her shoulders. "I have a liver problem. They say a lot of complicated words, but all I know is that I feel a lot of pain." An unusual compassion invaded Henrique's heart. "And your parents?" "I don't have any," she replied naturally. "My mother passed away when I was a newborn, and I never knew my father. I lived in a shelter, but I ran away because it was very sad there. Then I discovered that I could find food in the trash in your building." Henrique felt a shiver run down his spine. He had never thought about the amount of waste that was part of his routine. "How did you end up here?" he asked, his chest tight. "I fainted near where I get food. They brought me here in an ambulance. It was actually good because I have a warm bed and a meal every day." She forced a smile, showing a broken tooth. "But they said I need a transplant. My blood is rare and it's hard to find a compatible donor." The door opened, interrupting the conversation. A nurse appeared to take Talia back. Come on, young lady, time for your medicine. The little girl winked at Enrique. Tomorrow I want to hear the happy story, okay? He nodded, still unable to speak. Alone, Enrique picked up his cell phone and called Marta, his trusted secretary. I need you to research everything about a patient in the children's ward, named Talia. And also contact transplant specialists. Do whatever is necessary. Soon reports arrived confirming the seriousness of the situation. Talia urgently needed a liver transplant. Her blood type was rare, and she would have very little chance of getting one if a compatible donor was not found quickly. Unfortunately, warned Dr. Araujo, the waiting list is long, and it is not something that money can simply solve. It is a system with strict protocols. The next morning, Talia appeared in Henry's room again, but even more dejected. Upon seeing her, he decided to do something he had been avoiding for 17 years. He called Helena, his ex-wife. Hello? It's Henry, he began, uncertain. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Helena's voice echoed, restrained. After all this time, why are you calling me now? He took a deep breath. Because a homeless child taught me that I need to be human again. And because I can't keep running away from our past. They agreed to meet at a cafe where they used to date years ago. As he waited for the next day to arrive, Enrique felt, for the first time in a long time, a breath of hope. In another part of the hospital, Talia was suffering from intense fevers, resisting as best she could. Dr. Araujo made it clear, she doesn't have much time. Without the transplant, she may not make it through the next few weeks. At Café Vienna, which remained exactly as before, Helena appeared 20 minutes late. Even at 60 years old, she maintained the elegance that had once enchanted Enrique. They both remained paralyzed for a few seconds. Helena, thank you for coming. She looked away to her empty cup. Paulo was very worried when he found out about your heart attack. He wanted to come, but she left the sentence hanging in the air. Enrique felt a pang when he heard his son's name. How is he? He gives music lessons to children in a poor neighborhood. He's a pianist. Did you know? Helena's question was filled with a mixture of pride and pain. He shook his head. A sharp regret arose when he remembered that he had planned to make his son his successor in the business, but after the separation, he had lost all contact. Why did you call me? Helena asked more directly. Enrique told her everything about the heart attack, about Talia, about the miracle of having survived, and his desire to save that girl. She was moved. This girl reminds you of Paulo as a child, doesn't she? Helena commented softly. He also had big eyes and disproportionate courage. Exactly. And now, I need help. Not just yours, but his too. Before they could continue their conversation, Enrique's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from the hospital. Talia has gotten worse. She's in the ICU. He stood up, almost knocking over his chair. Helena, please come with me. She needs us. In the taxi on the way to the hospital, he explained, Talia's blood type is very rare. She needs a compatible living donor. At that, Helena held her breath. Paulo! What? Paulo has the same blood type. It was a ray of hope. At the hospital, Helena called her son on the cell phone. Paulo, dear, I need you to come to Santa Fe Hospital immediately. It's about a child, but it's connected to your father. The pediatric ICU was a place that always broke anyone's heart. Talia, in a bed full of tubes, seemed to have withered even more. The doctor, Dr. Lacerda, appeared with a heavy expression. She's going into liver failure. We need the transplant soon, or it will be too late. Enrique stayed by Talia's side until Paulo arrived. The young man came in, his 30 years reflected in a calm, but now shaken face. His eyes were identical to his mother's, and also reminded him of Enrique's own. Without saying anything, father and son hugged each other. After so long apart, that meeting was moving. Mom explained everything to me, Paulo whispered after a moment. You almost died, Dad, and now you want to save a girl. Henrique blinked, holding back tears. I need to do what's right, not just for her, but for what I wasted in my life. With the utmost naturalness, Paolo offered to do the compatibility tests. If I can help you, I will do it without hesitation. In a room next door, Talia came to her senses for a few minutes. She needed sedatives to bear the pain. When she saw Henrique, she smiled weakly. Did you bring the happy story? He swallowed hard. I'm still going to tell it. I just need a little more time, okay? Everything. The little girl closed her eyes again, lost between pain and weakness. The tests took days, and each positive result was a growing relief. Henrique and Helena took turns at the hospital. Paolo was determined to go ahead with the transplant. A few hours before the surgery, Leonardo Fernandez reappeared, wearing a look of dubious concern. Why are you so focused on this girl, Enrique? This could cost us dearly, including our company's reputation. The company? Enrique huffed, feeling his fury rising. For the first time, I'm thinking about something other than reports and shareholders. Well, I have proof that this child doesn't even have documents. Imagine if this gets out in the media, they'll accuse you of defrauding the transplant queue. Enrique glared at him. Say whatever you want. If this is blackmail, I won't give in. Leonardo gave a venomous smile. Let's see. You have 24 hours to decide whether to give up majority control or put up with the scandal. Leaving there, Henry leaned against the wall. His heart was pounding. He had to choose between saving Talia, exposing himself to the risk of ruin, or he could only murmur, this can't go on like this. In the room, he found Helena, Paolo, and Talia sleeping under the influence of tranquilizers. The doctor had insisted that she be sedated to bear the pain. I need to tell you something, he said, calling them aside. Leonardo gave me a dirty ultimatum. Paolo reacted indignantly. He wants to use Talia's situation to overthrow you as president. That's too petty. Enrique agreed, his face tense. However, it doesn't matter. This girl needs to live. I've decided what I'm going to do, and it's going to change all of our lives. In a small chapel inside the hospital, father, mother, and son gathered. I'm going to give up the presidency of my own company, Enrique revealed, his voice breaking. It's either that or jeopardize the surgery. Helena touched his shoulder. Are you sure? The company is your pride. It was my pride, he corrected. Today, my pride is seeing Paolo willing to save a girl with nothing. My pride is imagining Talia growing up. Who knows, maybe regaining her faith in life. The next morning, Leonardo received Henrique's proposal. Here is my resignation. He handed over a document. You can take over as president, but the partner, confused, shook his head. But what? I transferred 51% of my shares to a social investment fund. All of them will be used to build hospitals and pediatric transplant centers, and you can't do anything about it. Leonardo was stunned. Are you crazy? You're going to sink the legacy you built. Enrique just shrugged. My legacy is no longer what you think. And what about Talia's story? Tell the world. Let them know that a powerful man chose to defend a child with a serious illness. The news hit the market like a bombshell. While shareholders were agitated, Paolo went into the operating room to donate part of his liver to Talia. The operation was long and tense. Helena and Henrique waited anxiously. Every hour, a specialist brought cautious reports. It's complex, but so far everything is going as expected. Finally, after an interminable 12 hours, Dr. Lacerda left the surgical center. We completed the surgery successfully. Now we have to wait for the reaction of both of them. The emotion was contagious. Enrique let the tears flow freely. Helena hugged her ex-husband, and they cried together, as if life had finally granted them redemption. Paolo woke up first, still groggy. Did everything go well? And Talia? She's recovering, confirmed the doctor. But we need to wait. It was another 2 agonizing days. Then late in the afternoon, Talia regained consciousness. She opened her eyes slowly and found Enrique by her side. "You haven't told me the happy story yet," she whispered, very weakly. Enrique took her hand and felt a wave of tenderness. "I'll tell you now. Do you want to hear it?" She nodded slightly. "Once upon a time, there was a very rich man, but also very unhappy. He had everything that money could buy, but he felt no true joy. One day this man almost died from a heart problem until a little warrior appeared, who, even facing a dragon in her own body, had the strength to save his life." Talia blinked, letting a tear fall. "This story is beautiful. Does it have a happy ending?" Enrique couldn't help but smile. "Yes, it does, but we're still writing the ending." From then on, changes followed. Enrique shocked the business world by publicly announcing his definitive departure from the leadership and the creation of the Talia Foundation, whose objective was to finance transplants for underprivileged children. After being legally adopted by Helena and Enrique, which took a few weeks of formalities, Talia began living in a mansion that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Polo, now recovering, taught Talia how to play the piano and guitar every day, instruments he himself mastered. With each note learned, the girl smiled with an almost palpable happiness. The former emptiness in Enrique's mansion was filled with music, laughter, and even conversations about the color of the rooms that Talia would redecorate. One day, in the large hall that had recently been transformed into a music studio, Talia interrupted the rehearsals. "Grandpa, can I call you that, right?" Enrique felt a lump in his throat when he heard the word grandpa. "Of course, my princess." She pointed to the piano. "You promised to tell me the second part of the story." He sat next to her while Paolo watched everything proudly. In the second part of the story, the rich man realized that he didn't need power or money to be happy. All he needed was love and the desire to help. So he donated almost everything to save many other children, and that little warrior became his granddaughter forever. Paolo played a few soft notes, creating an even stronger emotional atmosphere. Talia then looked down. "And the dragon I had, will it ever come back?" Paolo put his hand on her shoulder. "I shared my liver with you, so if the dragon comes back, we'll fight together." The girl smiled, a smile so bright that it almost seemed to have invisible wings. While Talia was recovering, Helena and Enrique decided to visit the old building where the girl used to rummage through the trash. Standing in front of the large glass doors, he remembered the day she had snuck in unnoticed. It was frightening to think how almost no one had seen her there, so small and vulnerable. They decided to talk to the security guards and employees of the building to create a charity soup kitchen where homeless people could get food. Leonardo Fernandez, seeing the positive impact that Enrique's actions were causing, backed off from his attacks, fearing being seen as a villain, but his influence on the board was undermined. Many employees began to support the former president and his foundation. Little by little, Enrique realized that true power was not in having a position, but in inspiring real change. 2 months later, Dr. Lacerda announced that Talia was ready to be discharged. A commotion took over the hospital that day. Doctors, nurses, everyone gathered to say goodbye. The girl, already blushing and with vibrant eyes, held Enrique's hand tightly. "You're not going to run around looking for food in the trash anymore, right?" he asked, moved. She laughed. "Of course not. Now I have a family, and a huge room to decorate however I want." Helena took her other hand affectionately. "And there's a piano too, waiting for you." Enrique's car drove slowly through the streets of Porto Alegre until it reached the mansion. Festive decorations could be seen through the gates. The garden, filled with colorful balloons, had a banner reading, "Welcome, Talia." A group of employees were waiting to welcome her warmly. The girl stopped there for a moment, contemplating everything she had never dreamed of having. Paolo approached, touching her on the shoulder to get her attention. "There's another surprise in here." He led her to a room that had been transformed into a music room. A grand piano and a set of guitars sat in the center. "Shall we play something together?" Paolo suggested. "After all, this space is ours." Talia climbed onto the stool, still with the difficulty of someone who is strengthening herself. She pressed one key, then another, testing the sound. "Thank you," she murmured, looking at Paolo and then at Enrique, "for believing in me." Enrique smiled. "You are our family now. And family believes, cares, loves." The following months were marked by commitments from Enrique's new project. The Talia Foundation opened a transplant wing in the city's main public hospital, with billion-dollar donations that came in as soon as the media reported the moving story. The shares of Enrique's old company, now under new management, even suffered fluctuations, but he had stopped paying attention to market indexes. He had a new mission: to save the lives of children like Talia. Eventually, Talia and Paolo were invited to participate in a charity event, playing piano for patients at a children's hospital. The performance moved the staff and children in the hospital as Talia told them about her own transplant, encouraging the little ones not to give up on their dreams. "A big dragon is not stronger than us," she said, "especially when we have help from friends." One rainy morning, Helena appeared with news about Paolo. He wants to open a music school in the pediatric ward. She barely finished her sentence, smiling, because she knew that her son's dream was also strengthened with Talia around, teaching others to face their own pain. One afternoon, Talia asked again, "Grandpa, that happy story. Now I want to know the real ending." Enrique held her on his lap, contemplating her curious and hopeful face. The rich man found a little angel who gave meaning to his life. Together, they discovered that money can be a tool to multiply good, and that the greatest treasures are the smiles of the people we help. The girl interrupted him. "So the ending is everyone living happily ever after." He looked at his granddaughter. His voice choked. "If it depends on me, this ending will never end. Let's spread this happiness wherever we can." As the months passed, the mansion hosted charity concerts, fundraisers for sick children, and many other cultural activities. Enrique, transformed, saw Helena and Paolo smile again in his company. And Talia, who had previously lived on the streets without any prospects, had become the light of that close-knit family. On Talia's first birthday after her official adoption, they organized a celebration to which they invited dozens of children admitted to the new transplant center. There was music, theater, storytelling, and of course, a lot of emotion. At one point, while Paolo was playing the guitar in a corner of the garden, Talia joined him, playing the piano improvised on a portable keyboard. Enrique, with discreet tears, watched, knowing that that moment could not be bought with all the money in the world. Just before sunset, Talia went to him. "Grandpa, do you know what I learned? Tell me, my princess, that when we use what we have to help, we create a truly happy story." And it was at that very moment that Enrique felt his once sick heart beat with the strength of someone rejuvenated by faith and love. As for Talia, she looked at the horizon, remembering the day she thought the man on the floor of the office would not survive. "I'm glad I didn't let you die," she murmured, joking. Enrique smiled and hugged his granddaughter tenderly, knowing that there were many other children in the world who needed happy endings, and that now, thanks to a compassionate gesture from a little beggar, many hearts would also be transformed. Because sometimes the greatest miracles happen in the worst of times. And sometimes all it takes is a child's sincere request to awaken the dormant goodness in an adult. Talia proved it. A simple, happy story can change entire destinies. The weeks went by, and the routine at the Escobar mansion became more stable. private tutoring for Talia, frequent visits to hospitals that benefited from the foundation, and recitals in which Paolo and his sister opened small shows to raise more funds for new projects. One night, Enrique received an urgent phone call from Dr. Araujo. Remember when we talked about expanding the transplant project? We got authorization to set up 2 more pediatric wards in other cities. The businessman's voice sounded calm. That's wonderful, doctor. Let's go ahead. The news spread through the house. The next day, Talia woke up and found Helena in the kitchen, beaming. Little one, we will have to visit more children in other regions too. The little girl clapped her hands excitedly. Will I be able to take my music and my story to them too? Helena smiled. Of course, you are our little ambassador of love. Feeling a wave of joy, Talia ran to the music studio where Paolo was arranging sheet music. I want to learn a new song to play at the next inauguration, brother, she asked. He, who was already preparing a repertoire, pointed out, look at this classical composition. It speaks of hope and rebirth. I think it suits you. And so, with her fingers still delicate, Talia began to rehearse, missing notes but never giving up. Henry, as he walked through the door, noticed his granddaughter's stubborn expression. He smiled, aware that her determination had saved his own life, and as a bonus, had changed him irreversibly. One afternoon, they gathered for lunch when Paolo announced, the children's wing of the Hospital do Futuro is ready. They want Talia and I to give a presentation at the opening in 2 weeks. Helena was delighted. Wonderful! And how are we going to transport the entire structure? We can simplify it, Paolo explained. A simple keyboard and 2 microphones will create the atmosphere. The rest is Talia's energy. The girl, shy, commented, I hope the other children like it. The adoptive father, Enrique, immediately replied, they will love it. Your music comes from the heart, and it touches anyone. When the day arrived for the opening of the new sector, Talia found herself once again in front of an improvised stage, with around 50 children gathered together. Many were waiting for transplants or undergoing heavy treatments. As soon as Paolo played the first notes, Talia took a deep breath and concentrated on the keys, playing delicately. It was a softer but intense melody that spoke of overcoming obstacles. At the end, a storm of applause erupted from the auditorium. A doctor present moved, stood up and declared, it is for these reasons that music heals the soul. Thank you, Talia. Back at the mansion that night, Talia went to Henry's room. She knocked lightly on the door and entered, holding her old, worn-out teddy bear that her grandfather had given her while she was still in the hospital. Grandpa, do you remember the day you almost died in the meeting room? She asked, abruptly, but without sadness. As if it were today, he replied, sighing. But you were there, and you held my hand. Talia pressed the bear to her chest. Now I know it wasn't a coincidence. I was supposed to save you, and you were supposed to save me, and together we were supposed to save other children. Henry, with tears in his eyes, nodded in agreement. That's why our happy story will never end. In a short time, the project multiplied, and the Talia Foundation began to inspire similar initiatives in several places. It received invitations to events, philanthropy awards, and news reports praised the radical change of the powerful businessman Enrique Escobar, who, previously only sought profit, now dedicated himself to building hospitals and opportunities. At each hospital that was built, little Talia attended the inauguration, moving everyone with musical performances that recalled her own journey. 1 year after the transplant surgery, there was a special concert. Paolo and Talia played as a duo for hundreds of people, including transplant recipients, doctors, nurses, and donors. Helena and Enrique, holding hands in the front row, cried and laughed at the same time, seeing the daily miracle that the little girl represented. When Talia finished the final piece, she shouted into the microphone in her sweet, childlike voice, Thank you for believing in us. Each of you is a piece of this happy story that never ends. In a corner, Leonardo Fernandez, who had decided to attend in silence, watched in amazement at this wave of affection and genuine transformation. If, before, he had tried to overthrow Henrique, now he felt ashamed and without the courage to declare his opposition to a movement that only spread good. Late in the evening, back at the mansion, Talia snuggled up on the couch next to Helena, staring at the city lights through the window. Paolo was putting away the instruments, and Enrique was preparing hot drinks for everyone. Noticing that the girl was watching the night with a dreamy expression, Helena asked, "What are you thinking about, my dear?" "About everything. You know, Grandma, if I hadn't gone into that building that day, and if Grandpa hadn't had the attack right in front of me, maybe we wouldn't even be here now." Helena stroked her hair. Life has mysterious ways of bringing paths together. Henry returned to the room, offering mugs of hot chocolate. Before Talia could take hers, he lifted her onto his lap with ease. "We still have many happy stories to share, don't you think?" The girl nodded, closing her eyes, almost falling asleep from exhaustion. "Yes, Grandpa, many. Especially when we understand that giving is much better than receiving." And with this certainty, they moved forward, certain that true wealth was not in the coffers, but in the immensity of affection that multiplies in each act of compassion. Because sometimes, all the world needs is a child who, with nothing, has the courage to remind adults of the true value of love. The days continued to pass in harmony. Talia was making great strides on the piano and was already trying to compose short songs inspired by her routine with her new family. Helena and Paolo planned to record a small independent album, the proceeds of which would go to the foundation. Enrique, for his part, did not miss his old corporate environment, as he found infinite satisfaction in seeing children being saved by initiatives that his money, after all, altruistically financed. The first major milestone after this period was a thank you letter Talia received from another transplant recipient. The boy, from another region, said that, thanks to the project, he now had a whole life ahead of him. Talia, overcome with emotion, shared the letter at a charity event, drawing applause and tears from those present. "He wants to learn music too," she exclaimed, beaming. Late that night, already at the mansion, Enrique went up to the terrace to contemplate the lights of Porto Alegre, reflecting on how it had all started with a heart attack and a girl in rags. A chill ran down his spine as he thought about what would have happened if Talia hadn't been there at that exact moment. Helena found him, holding a handkerchief against the night wind. "You have the same pensive expression as the day you were discharged. What's going through your head?" He took a deep breath. "Sometimes I wonder how many Talias there are out there. How many children wandering around without attention." Helena rested her head on his shoulder. "You turned this reflection into concrete action. That's all that can be done." Enrique smiled, a real smile, full of life. "The merit goes to her too, and to Paolo, and to you. I wasn't the only one who wrote this story." Then, with a hint of emotion in his voice, he concluded, "Perhaps, finally, I have understood what it means to truly live. And at the center of this entire journey of transformation and redemption was Talia, the little girl who, with her plea, had begun the happiest chapter in the family's life. A story whose outcomes would continue to multiply each time a new child received help from someone who dared to extend a hand at the right moment. Because when it comes to genuine love, there is no limit. It expands, reaches distant hearts, and inspires others to do the same. This is how happy stories are built that never have a definitive end, but infinite new beginnings.